Good evening, everyone. We have a really exciting session planned out next. It's the hot topic of this season. It's generative AI, and primarily the session is around how generative AI is shaking the fundamentals of security and also privacy to a large extent. We have a group of esteemed panelists who will be deliberating on this issue. I invite the moderator for the session, Mr. Atul Kumar, who leads government affairs and global trade development at DSCI on stage. For speakers, we have Ms. Manisha Singh, who is the head of automation and integration at Alliance Technology, Mr. Nagmani Singh, who is the AVP of data analytics at SG Analytics, Dr. Pradeepti, who is an assistant professor at the C.R. Rao Advanced Institute of Mathematics, Statistics and Computer Science, and Mr. Srinivas Pusarla, who is the Senior VP and Group Chief Privacy Officer at Infosys. Thank you to the panelists for joining us for this session. Over to you, Atul.
Yeah, working. Thank you, Shivangi. And we are just waiting for Srinivas to join. I think he was outside. So meanwhile, we can start and he'll join soon. So let me start with what we have started the day with actually. In morning, we have one session around consciousness and AI. This was the starting session of BPM today. What we have discussed is like how the AI models are evolving and moving to that level where they are becoming conscious, or even emotional quotient are getting inbuilt in those kind of AI engines. We have also looked at collective learning, what those machines are having, which probably the human won't have that kind of thing, because one machine learned, then that means other machines will also learn with that experience, right? So those kind of things we have discussed, and we have went into the detail what kind of things we can see in future because of these kind of changes happening. With that background, we have thought of this session. Where we'll try to explore more on how generative AI is evolving and what kind of challenges the generative AI adoption in the ecosystem is creating challenge. So now Srinivas is here. Welcome. So now if we look back a couple of months back when there was no chat GPT, so one thing was there, one day the chat GPT came in, and the same day or in a week of time, it became very common thing actually. That's the kind of pace we have seen with chat GPT kind of thing, or overall generative AI models which have evolved. Technically, if we see, nothing much has changed. Models were there, the kind of algorithms were there. What has changed is kind of a compute that we have today, or kind of accurate data and the kind of data we have with which these models are learning. And that is definitely helping the technologists and the researchers in the area to keep innovating and helping this domain to evolve. So with this background, we have a panel of eminent speakers today, and we'll try to delve deep into this subject. So what we have thought of, we'll have like two things broadly covered under this. Definitely one, the kind of the positive narrative that this technology has created, the kind of evolution it has in past and currently having, and the way it is getting adopted by the industry and government as well. And then definitely the challenges it is creating and compliance requirement emerging out of it. So those kind of things we are going to deliberate in this session, and I'll be happy to have quite an engaging session, and feel free to raise questions and comment in case you have any. So I'll start with this, and I'll start with a quick initial remarks by each one of you. Let me start with Manisha. So she has a vast experience in the domain of BFSI, and she's experimenting a lot of things around generative AI in BFSI. So I'll request her to start with a quick initial remarks and sharing some use cases and the evolution happening in BFSI sector.
Sure. Thank you so much, first of all, DSCI, for having me here. I would be covering from the finance services side because of my broad experience in the banking and insurance sector. Generative AI is very exciting, and it's all over the news. But then, at the same time, it has all the risks. And the finance industry is already a regulated sector. All right. So and which is why the risks are also regulated.
There is some
Hello.
disturbance actually. Yeah. This is
Check. Is this fine? So in the finance sector, which is so regulated, we have seen technologies come and go, but nothing as powerful and as quick as generative AI, has, the impact the generative AI has created has not been, we have not seen such an impact, and that too so fast on the finance services sector till now. And you all would be aware that AI for generation has been around, but it was available only to the specialists. It was available for the data scientists, the ML and AI engineers. But the generative AI, especially this interactive conversational interface that it offers, which is powered by the LLMs, this greatly democratizes access to artificial intelligence, to the masses, right? And with people, so it's now available to all of us, all the masses, be it non-technical or technical. And this is the greatest benefit and impact that it's having, and that way it opens up so many opportunities for innovation where people can drive things their way. But then at the same time, it has those risks also. And second point is around the hype that's created around generative AI. There's so much of hype, there's so much of data, on the internet about its adoption. But then I want to highlight one thing here. There was a recent study conducted by Gartner on the adoption of Gen AI in the finance sector recently. And it was found that only hardly 17 to 18% of the organizations are really implementing it on ground. And rest of the organizations are either planning for it or watching out for the next steps. They're still evaluating the risks versus the benefit part, right? So they haven't taken a call yet. And it is because of all these, the risk factor, and people are not sure. And the policy landscape is still evolving. We do not have concrete policies around it. And so, which is why in this finance sector, we have to be very careful of what we are putting for our clients, for our customers, what are we adopting in our organization for our employees that way, right? Now coming to the use cases part, there are, a lot of use cases possible, in the finance services sector. I would break this down into broadly 4 categories. One could be on the operation side. It could be used for risk summarization. It could be used for evaluating the different policies, different reporting documents, and it can quickly create in one glance, provide you a risk summary that you can leverage. And then besides that, it can also be used to automate the customer support in a big way. There's so much of KB articles and queries that we receive from our clients, both internal as well as external. And there's so many tickets and noise in our, on the support side, which can be automated with this amazing technology, right? By feeding all these knowledge articles, how-to articles, and generative AI can really answer complex queries on that front. And besides that, third thing is code generation and translation is another very interesting use case that this sector can leverage. It is low risk. We can start from here and understand the technology and also play around with it because of its minimal risk in the code generation area. This can greatly help. Since in the finance sector, the infra is, there's a lot of legacy infra, legacy systems are there. So for migrations, this code generation and translation can greatly help. Second category would be the customers. For the customers, it can be used for personalization, right? It can personalize insights and advices on the investment side, as well as it can also analyze voice of our customers to understand, are our customers happy or not happy, and accordingly we can tweak our strategies, to ensure enhanced customer experience, right? And then similarly, for our employees on the customer side, it can be used for research, for preparing portfolios, for preparing planning documents that way for our assistants in a big way. And then besides that, there are a lot of vendors, third-party vendors who are already embedding generative AI in their products, which are already used by the finance sector. For example, SAP Einstein, it has embedded generative AI for CRM, and similarly, a lot of conversational AI tools, third-party tools, are embedding Gen AI in their products, which is being, used in a big way in such industries overall. But then, overall, as it is being adopted in this sector, there are, the senior executives and CIOs are equally concerned about the risks that this technology also poses, especially, almost like 63% of our CIOs are concerned, about the hallucinations part, the errors that it can generate, in the output. And then besides that, there's a risk for, misuse of this technology by the bad people. And there are risks of biases. So all these things are very crucial, must be borne in mind, and we should navigate all these things together, especially in this sector, because it's a highly regulated sector, and we just cannot adopt it like that. We need to have stringent measures around that. That would be my take.
Sure, Manisha. Actually, in BFSI or similar sectors, the kind of experiment this vertical is doing with this generative AI, whether it's personalized financial services kind of thing, or market sentiment analysis, or even from the security perspective, whether it's anti-money laundering or fraud detection kind of use cases, these kind of things are getting evolved in this kind of critical sector. So those kind of experiments are definitely taking shape and probably help in more adoption. But at the same time, people have challenges like employees and the people who are leveraging it, what kind of data they are uploading on these kind of engines, which may lead to a lot of compliance challenges or many kind of privacy breaches and all. So with this, I'll move to Nagmani with you, and with your experience in media and other verticals. Can you please share your insights?
Sure.
How things are evolving?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me here. Adding on to what Manisha was just saying, right? On the media side, I think the benefit is it's a creative industry. So the loss of doing anything wrong with ChatGPT or any kind of Gen AI is lesser as compared to a fintech as a sector or pharma as a sector. So with that, I think a lot of experiments are going to start with the retail and media as an industry when you talk about Gen AI. And that's where I see it, evolving to different other sectors. So a lot of learnings are going to be taken from there. That's one. Second is, irrespective of whether you want to use it right now or you want to ignore it right now, eventually I think a lot of function has to evolve and start using it, embracing it, because that's something similar that happened when computer was introduced, right? A lot of us were scared that the jobs were taken. The first thing was fear. I think that's how Gen AI also started with fear. Even a non-techie know what a chat GPT is, got so many subscribers to start with. So buzz is already there. I think this is the right time to discuss it because there are still a lot of unknowns. It'll be unfair to say that we know a lot of it. I think a lot of it is still getting explored. But one thing which is very common across industry that people are still trying to figure out is how safe it is to use, because if it is trained on so much of data without you knowing it, then what will happen if you actually give your data consciously to the system and try and get results out of it. So that's one, and I don't think there are definitive answers to whether or not your data is going to be used at that level. So of course there are a lot of data privacy part that will come later. We'll discuss about it, but essentially that's one thing which is stopping it to be used at the scale that we initially thought in the first 2 months that it's going to be used. The other aspect is in terms of trustability. How much can you trust the output? Because a lot of it is pre-trained. You are not even training yourself. Maybe you're fine-tuning at some level, but essentially it is pre-trained. So the output that is coming in, a lot of articles were there where a summarization of a lot of your historical heroes were wrong. The way they characterize something is wrong, and people start getting offended, right? So that's just it's a tip of an iceberg, right? And which says that if you start using it for businesses, the risk is much higher. because it's not for any gaming purpose that we are trying to do it. So that is where the challenges start, and that is where you were saying the CXOs. The adoption, I think, is going to take some more time, is what my understanding is. Especially, we will want to take baby steps toward it. We'll want to do it from something where we see that even if we fail, the consequences are going to be lower, right? Now, with that said, I think in media, some use cases are very straightforward, which a lot of us know, like content creation. While you might not want to create a whole series or a movie using GenAI to start with, but maybe you can do it as a marketing team, you can do a lot of content creation, because a lot of effort today is being spent on how to promote your teaser, how to promote your trailers. And it'll be very easy if you just ask a GenAI to understand that this is the genre of my trailer, can you help promote, right? So a lot of that content can get created. So that's one easy one. The other things is operations, as you said, any kind of chatbot that you have across industries, it's not unique to media. A lot of bugs that keeps coming up in your platforms. If you're watching a Netflix and it crashes, there is a big team sitting there trying to fix it. Now, for any kind of chat support that you have, I think it's only going to get better with LLMs getting adopted in conversational AI. So that's one operation part, and which is a quick one, and you don't see a lot of losses happening there, because maximum what it can happen is eventually it has to go to someone to solve for it, and a bot is not able to solve for it. So the quality of bot would improve for sure. There are other cases like if you want to translate a language, which is still being explored. I think translation is one thing which is still slightly tricky, because if you want to release something, then you would want to first make your team sit and do it. But it's better than someone doing it and then checking it. So a lot of the process will move from doing that translation to validating that translation. I think that's some effort that will be saved over there. And there are likewise, any kind of, new character you want to introduce to your series, you can check with, what is the buzz which is going on. A lot of conversation happen on social media. If you like a series, you start talking about it. So a lot of social media content is going to help understand what is the buzz going around, right? And accordingly, what is the content in demand? Because one challenge almost all the OTT players today is facing. So by OTT, I mean like Netflix and Amazon Prime, right? So what they're facing is, what is it that they should do from a content strategy point of view to be ahead of it? Most of the OTT players are not in profit right now, right? A lot of them are making losses because there are so many OTT currently just evolving and then only new coming up. So while it will get, I would say, one will be, you will still have 2 to 3 big players maybe, but the problem of content will still be there, right? There are a lot of free content, which suddenly you see someone acquiring it and getting popular. So one help would be to understanding what kind of sentiment is coming out from the audience before actually trying to acquire that content, right? So the content acquisition team can do a lot using the Gen AI, and there are a lot more. I mean, a lot of it that we don't even know currently. Even I've been doing media from last 6-7 years, but I think I will not have answers to where all it can be used. Right? Sam Alton, I think he himself said that I don't know where all we can use it. But essentially, there are a few things where it can be used, and which shows the power that it has, right? I mean, the possibilities are endless. We can still keep exploring in bits and pieces where we want to adopt it. But eventually, I think it's going to be adopted. It's just a matter of time when different companies are going to do it. Early adopters, I think, are going to be benefited. Of course, there is a risk associated to it, but the benefits are going to be higher because you know what are the challenges that you faced, and accordingly you are ready for it. Not every challenge is you're going to go out and tell the world, right? And that, a lot of it will remain within an organization, and that's, I think, is one way how a lot of organizations are seeing it. Now, because I have worked in data services company across, so I had media for SG. So a lot of it is dependent on client. That's a problem that comes up with which sector you belong from. So if you're from a services sector, you are dependent on what clients really want to solve. Yeah, you can create certain products, but again, the adoption of product will be a question. But for product companies who own their own product, I think the adoption would be slightly easier. But otherwise, I think eventually it will be something which will be as standard as using an ML model. So that's what my take on this.
Oh, sure. Thanks for that, actually. And rightly said, it is just a matter of time in terms of adoption. So some verticals that have already started adopting it. Even we have seen some sort of bans on ChatGPT and these kind of LLMs. After that, even those bans got revoked at certain places just because of the push the government received from the community, because community wants to adopt it, industry wants to adopt it. So those kind of things are happening, and especially from the creative industry. I think I was going through some study, and I've seen even crafting the first draft to even creating a new product design and new product model, people are leveraging these kind of generative AI engine to produce such things, whether it's first draft or summarization, and especially where they need to be very responsive or fast, like you said in media, right, where you need to be very agile in terms of your response. These kind of models and these kind of engines are contributing significantly, and that's why it's getting adopted in a big way. And they are trying to balance out between the risk and the benefits that they are reaping out of it.
In fact, gaming industry is one industry which is actually adopting it already a lot, creating those virtual environments, personalization, everyone see your own, opponents differently. So I think these are some of the use cases which are going to help across a lot of industries.
So far, I think industry is also trying to establish balance between what kind of benefits they are leveraging out of it and the kind of risk they are dealing with. And with that, I'll move to Dr. Pradeep. She is actually working on the research part of generative AI. And we were talking on that front, how things have evolved. So I'll request you to talk about that as well before you share your insights on the use cases and the research happening in the domain. As initially we said, it is not something very new which has come. It was there in the system from long time, right? Whether it's Markov chain or kind of a transformer kind of algorithms, things were there. Now what we have extensive compute, we have extensive amount of accurate data or quality data, which is helping these engines to be more and more stronger. So your views on that, how things are evolving and how you see this kind of evolution are actually going to be more effective for the industry and government to adopt it.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I work on basically cybersecurity and how to use it for AI ML as aid for solving any problems in cybersecurity. So as part of that, when I look at generative AI, I do not feel that it's something very new. It's something which has been there from maybe 2010, but the name at that point was different. At the end of the day, generative AI systems are mainly used for taking some input data and then studying the structure and patterns in that input data and use it to generate some new data which has similar characteristics. So such things have already been there, only the name was different. Earlier they were called transformer-based deep neural networks, and then maybe around 2014 or something, another name which was very popular was GANs. Generative adversarial networks, and they were extensively used, and they were also pretty much doing the same thing, that if you give them some data, they were generating new data which had similar characteristics. So we were working extensively on these GANs and what is called as variational autoencoders, which are also unsupervised in nature or semi-supervised in nature. So if you give them some input, they will try to pick up the characteristics and patterns and generate similar kind of data. So usually in labs and in our kind of network testbeds that we have, when we try to study cybersecurity problems and if we try to capture data, right, so we are able to capture genuine packets very easily. Because genuine data is something we ourselves can generate. But if I want to capture malicious data or traffic, you will not be having that much. But if you have to create a good MLs or deep learning system, we should have unbiased data. Like 50% at least should be genuine and 50% should be that, so that the system learns well and it can be more generalized. But since we cannot capture that much of malicious data, we use these kind of GANs and generative systems to synthetically generate more malicious traffic, and this is how we have been using them. Just that the advent of large language models has made this generative AI terminology very fancy right now, but it's something which has been there for a very long time. And what I feel about the challenge is, like any AI system or ML system, the engine or the machine is only as good as the data on which it was trained. So if, because the data is the fuel at the end of the day. So whatever issues that we are seeing with generative AI and all is only because maybe the data on which it was modeled on is not relevant enough, or is not sufficient enough, or is not unbiased. Like it is biased in some way. So if I have to have a more generalized model, then the data has to be more generic. It should be more sufficient. Like I should have a lot of data, and I should make sure that it is unbiased, so that all these issues or negatives that are being pointed out towards generative AI do not come up. So this is what I feel about that.
So thanks for that. Actually, whenever we talk about generative AI, the first question that comes to each one of us, and this is what we were deliberating, is security and the privacy. So to look at the privacy perspective, we have Srinivas here. He is one of the leading expert in the country from privacy perspective. So just wanted to have your view. If you look at now, we have a Data Protection Act in India as well. Taking example of say Canada. Canada allows, and here if you look at these LLMs and generative AI models, what we are generally doing, we are leveraging a lot of publicly available data. So if I recall it correctly, it's almost 15 million websites that got scrawled by GPT 3.5 or GPT 3, which helped them to build that engine. Now, almost, I have noted down that it's 570 GB of data they have scrawled to build that engine. In text form, 570 GB is like huge amount, right? So much personal data went into that, and you don't know if it is a breached data which was scrawled by the engine or what kind of data was there. So from that perspective, we take example of say Canada. PIPEDA allow publicly available data to be leveraged for this kind of purpose. But there is a category. You can only leverage the data which is of certain type, like telephone directory or your professional directory and all those things. So sometimes some regulations limit it, but still those engines got developed having extensive amount of data. So what do you think, how these things have evolved, and where you see a balance between the use cases evolving for the industry and these kind of scenarios already in place while these engines are learning?
Sure. So being from privacy side, I will touch upon only these aspects.
Yeah.
The huge benefits of all kinds of AI, including generative AI. So if you look at, before we get into privacy aspects, you should see why we are concerned about the privacy related provisions which are there in many acts these days, right, on explainability, bias and all. If you look at any AI, not just generative AI, we take a step back and see that there is a, I'm talking of machine learning based AI and not expert systems and all, which didn't have machine learning, right? The previous AI. In this machine learning based AI, the key process is two-stage process. One is called induction, the other is deduction, only two. Now, induction is the process of learning. Like we also learn. When we try to walk, we fall. When we first time drive, we hit some objects, we figure out. All that happens completely without in the subconscious mind. Now that process, actually, mathematically, if you have to go, it is simply something we all know in college days. It's Bayes' law. The Bayes' law of conditional probability, which all of you know, at least would have studied in early days, is what is the probability of some event given that there is another event which you know about. And that is, in simple words, if you put it, it is about updating the knowledge continuously based on what you see and what you hear. And the entire machine learning is that, nothing else. But you can classify into three areas. Basically, it could classify, it could predict, it could generate. The things which we are talking about is generate. Now, the more privacy risks are actually there in classify and predict, less in generative AI because of the non-PI involved. But the basic issues from the issues of accuracy, bias, etc., comes because of the statistical probability. So fundamentally, we should understand that because there's a probability of any event is not 100%. So you'll always have that uncertainty. But in reality, we are okay with that. We don't want perfect answers for everything. Most parts of our life in day-to-day life, we are okay with 90% accuracy, 99% accuracy, even 70% accuracy is fine with us, depending on the nature of application. Particularly in recommendation engines, we are okay with, we just ignore it, we don't like it. Similarly, in this text, generative AI, it's useful for us to get a grasp of what's the world thinking about. We don't exactly need to know what we want to know. It helps us to get 90% idea. So that way it's great, but largely if you see from the privacy issues, I will not touch upon any particular regulation. Most regulations are at early stage. The ChatGPT ban in Italy was from GDPR, but the new EU AI Act, which will get through by December, expected to be enforceable from December, they will of course announce the dates, has additional provisions. There's an overlap with GDPR. A lot of AI aspects are very much part of GDPR since May 2018. Many of us did. Generative AI is not so much in place, but the things like accuracy, automated decision making, Article 22, and many provisions apply for AI, all kinds of AI. But what explicitly the AI Act brought was about explicitly on explainability, bias, accountability, human in loop. A lot of these provisions actually overlap. If you see, if you put them into a diagram, they will have cause and effect relationship. They are not unique. They are not mutually exclusive, very clear. But they put it. I think one day they will have that clarity that everything is not like this. They are actually, in a flow diagram, if you put, they'll have intersections and there'll be a cause and effect. So if from privacy perspective, I see two broad issues. One, pre-learning, pre-model deployment, and post-model deployment. Pre-model deployment is not many of us are touching it. We left it vague, and I think nobody is talking about it for some reason, including it's not very clear from Garante's judgment that a lot of data that is used for learning is scraped from internet or from internet, from wherever, right? Sources. You mentioned Canada, for example. Certain things are fine, some are not fine. Now this scraping, it was done, you gathered the information. Technically, you are not supposed to take this data from other sources and use it. Now, one may argue that a lot of data which is put in the public domain is free. Yet we all know, we all agree, publicly available data is not PII. That's what people think, everybody, including India, defined it that way. But what we are missing the point there is something which we have not thought deeply. Maybe it'll come, people need to realize after a while, and we sometimes don't want to realize because there's a compelling need for ignoring it, is the fact that data which is available in the public domain is good to see, to view, to maybe download for your use. But can you subject it to automated processing by using AI? We never thought what will be the answer. The answer to that question depends on what impact does it have on people. If it extracts the data in a form where it spills out the real data tomorrow, like it happened in the case of Italian thing, it's really serious for me. If it draws an image like the thispersondoesn'texist.com, you all would have seen that website. It generates you update and you get new image. What if deepfakes generate real image? Right? All those aspects are serious concerns we have. For this purpose, the premise is, the argument is that data which is available in the public need to be used in a form only as much as it doesn't harm me. Just like when you buy a book from a bookstore, you buy the book for your use. You are not allowed to copy it and sell it. That's an implicit understanding. Imagine if there was no printing press. There is no digital photography. There was no need for copyright law. You agree? Why do we need copyright law? Just because we have printing press, we have digital media. Just like that, we are waiting for a law to come on which will prohibit capturing personal information from the internet to use in forms which will cause harm. That harm, people didn't realize. Today you realize, better make laws for it. But how do we make it? A huge damage has been done. People have already scraped. OpenAI has done, trillions of data has been taken away. And if they de-identify it, fine, but a lot of data is not de-identified. What harm it can cause, we have to wait and see. So that is a missing point even in the judgment, that the rights which people are talking about, okay, you have right to object. I think there's some privacy policy updated and said you can object to it. Okay, we will take consent, we'll inform. Some said performance of contract, legitimate interest, these things are being used. Article 6 of GDPR. Now, those are all there, but who is the data subject? Do I know, for example, did OpenAI use my data? Do you know? No, we don't know. And how will people approach? I have to keep writing to all the guys in the world saying that, did you capture my data, where from? Do you think anybody will look into that? So these are aspects which are very difficult. So this is pre-AI. And of course, this spilling of the data, which is a serious concern, which I mentioned. The post is about, which people are talking about, is that prompt engineering. When you actually question the AI, ask questions, you get responses. Your own data is going to get, in addition to IP address, cookie, etc., blah, blah, all that stuff. So your own data is going to go there. Is it okay? It is lead to both IP issues and privacy issues. Because the fact that the questions I'm asking is tagged against me. And that there's an issue of notice, but I think they said notice will be given and legitimate interest will be used. But what about copyright issues that if company data is leaked? So as long as within this environment it is safeguarded, it's fine. But the previous one, which is about the general data from the internet, there is no solution as of now, I see, except de-identification, anonymization, which is very, very expensive. Nobody's going to use it. So there is a huge gray area in all these aspects, and copyright issues, of course, are beyond my area territory, so I'm leaving for others to speak. People have touched upon. That's to summarize in a brief. Of course, there are more issues in the other kinds of AI where there is a decision making which impacts you. Here, those are not there, but there are other larger issues which we spoke about.
Oh, definitely. Thanks, Srinivas, for this, actually. This is giving us a broader perspective how these privacy concerns are actually there, and probably this will lead us to somewhere where we can try to address. And here, given the time I'm just seeing, probably we can have just one round of inputs on the compliance side, and probably I'll say more from the protection point of view. How can we put the safeguards from technology perspective, from compliance perspective? It's like from technology perspective, we have innovators innovating. Even in India, I can see Avilash is sitting over here. See, they're creating kind of a solutions which are actually helping enterprises, even individual, to sort of leverage these LLMs and generative AI engines in more, I will say, safe way, actually. It is providing kind of abstraction where you can safeguard your sensitive information. So those kind of things are happening from technology perspective. At the same time, we are getting regulations, which definitely, if we have more stringent regulations, probably it will curb the innovation. But to safeguard, we need to have something. But before moving to that discussion, I just recall one instance on this, what we were discussing yesterday as well around this Bard learned that Bangla language, actually, right? So sometimes we say then these engines need to have that kind of extensive information to learn. But what we have seen in case of Bard learning Bangla language, I think it was a case in Bangladesh, where with a very limited information, that engine could learn a very extensive amount of that language, right? So these kind of things are also happening. So even if you provide a very small set of information, that engine can learn extensively based on other learning that engine has. At the same time, I think it was an experiment by Harvard where they've created a town of bot, and those bots started conversating among themselves in a very emotional way and as like a human. Those kind of experiments are leading us to think about it, where it will go, right? At the same time, the kind of benefit we are getting, definitely we should leverage it, and it is good for the ecosystem, industry, all of us, actually. So from that perspective, definitely we need to look at the safeguards from technology as well as compliance perspective. So without limiting like who will cover the compliance and the technology, I'll request each one of you. We can start with Manisha, you. Sure. If you can share your insights quickly, given the time in hand.
Yeah, I get that, right. So I think with generative AI, we really need to revamp our policies and compliances, on the security from the security standpoint. And then, we need to instill explainability, in our models that we are using, and for that we could use citations, and these citations could be included, in the outputs, and these citations could cover about what was the source of information that was used to train the model. And then besides that, was copyrighted data used to train the model on or not? And such information is very important to be included in the outputs that are generated. Besides that, we also require some sort of stamp or water tagging. Sorry, what do you call it? There's some stamp that the content that's generated, it has come from AI, and it's not human generated. So we do need such stamps as well in our outputs. And then we also need to have human in the loop, which would keep a watch on all these outputs generated and then provide feedback to fine-tune these models better overall. And then also we need to decide as to how much control we want to give to these external data, because although we are fine-tuning these, but then a large part of the output and hallucinations is controlled by the extent to which we are using the external data on these models as well. And then besides that, I would also like to share a very interesting framework which has come from Stanford. It's called HELM framework, Holistic Evaluation of Language Models. It has come from their CRFM team, which covers, it evaluates holistically almost 36 models. That includes OpenAI, and Microsoft Azure OpenAI, and then Llama, and all such leading models in the industry. And it really adopts a holistic approach where it standardizes the overall evaluation by evaluating all these models against a standard, a unified standard. wherein it's factoring the key KPIs, the key performance metrics that's, which includes fairness, calibration, uh, robustness, and all such metrics, almost like 7 metrics it's covering. And then that way it gives you a lot of insights, and this would be very useful for the research people and policymakers to really understand what these models are able to do, what these models are not able to do. And as an output, this study, it provided that, the closed models which do not have access, which public do not have access to, these are more accurate. Yeah, and then also they're more accurate, as well as accuracy and precision. These are all correlated, and then definitely by having human in the loop, it can greatly fine tune and improve the outputs and the gaps on these models. So overall, we need to start small in a controlled environment, have a holistic approach. Right, but then with democratization, we also need to have, we need to innovate responsibly. That is what I would say.
Sure. So definitely, let's start small, and then probably in a controlled way we can think of growing fast. And with that, probably
Yeah.
Nagmani, if you can share.
I think most of it is covered. Couple of things. So one is a lot of fear is about your data being on cloud. Like it was started when even AWS came in with services, right? We didn't know if AWS is actually going to misuse it. It never happened. At least we don't know that. So it's the same thing, right? If as long as you know that the data is within your premise, the fear is less. At least we don't know if it can misuse. So one thing that she rightly mentioned, right, is making sure that you're using the codes which you are in under control of. You're not giving back any data back to the cloud. And using maybe on-premise to start with, which is slightly orthodox, but at least you know that the first angle is taken care and you're not trying to take care of too many things at once. The second is understanding what are your points where you are actually concerned about the privacy. For example, if it is PII data, you should anyway not be feeding it. So you should not look at feeding any PII data to any of the models, irrespective whether it's a Gen AI or not. So that you should take care of. You should continue doing that. Third would be making sure that your regulation, the policies that you have in-house, irrespective of whether a government comes up with or not, but as an organization, as your client partner, you are ensuring that the data is secure and you're not leaving it for any assumptions. You're not leaving it that tomorrow it comes up, then you can go back and say that, look, we just use what everyone is using, right? So owning that up, I think that's very important. Owning that up in a way that you know what are different points of leakages and you take care of all of them as good as you know of it. Maybe there could still be things which you're unaware of, which is fine, but at least what you're aware of, you're putting those frameworks right there in place before actually trying to make money out of it, right? That's very important. That's more of a mindset change that is required. But otherwise, I think a lot of it is, a lot of the fear rather, or a lot of questions around security is also, apart from what you covered, what Srinivas covered is also about people not knowing it enough, right, how it works. So as long as you know how it works, how your data is interacting, a lot of that will take a back seat, and you will know that, okay, there is not so much of worry that we have to have. If we can use any other ML model, it's as good as using a Gen AI, as long as all your the PII data is taken care of. So I think that's pretty much it. And as and when we know more about it, because there are a lot of other such models coming up, maybe there will be different ML model which already take care of it, and will come up with a commitment, right, in future, saying that we will take care of certain data guardrails from our side as well.
So
But
as you
till
said,
that time, I think it's ownership of any organization, any individual using that data to ensure that you're not giving it back in a public domain.
So as you said, if you know how it is functioning and
Yes.
all, probably it's opening up a discussion on like if it's a black boxed kind of algorithms. Generally, generative AI works in a manner in which generally generative AI works. So from that perspective, how can we make it more, I would say, transparent from the technology perspective and more explainable, I would say, so that we can trust more on that and we can have more effective utilization of that in critical sectors as well. So if you can throw some lights on that.
So explainable AI is actually booming after generative AI the thing and all. So unfortunately, deep learning networks, the more deeper the models become, now we are having millions of features, so we are having too many hidden layers in the middle. and we are not able to actually trace or pinpoint how the input is actually arriving at the output. That is the curse, or the curse of dimensionality. That's how it is called in ML, and that is leading to a lot of problems, and people are not able to trust the generative AI systems because they do not understand the workflow of how the input is actually arriving at the output, which is leading to a lot of trust issues. A lot of research is happening where people are trying to identify how generative AI or any kind of an AI deep learning system can be made more explainable is by using many explainable AI tools. So a lot of interpretability tools are being developed. IBM and Microsoft are actually right now working a lot on developing such interpretability tools where they are trying to identify what are those important features which are really helping us arrive from the input to output, and what parts of the input are actually helping us develop the output. So there is something called input feature analysis and plots which are being developed where we can visually try to understand how we arrive from the input to output. So that is one part, and I feel another challenge is like for any other AI system, security of the generative AI systems after it is being developed and set up is also important, because nowadays adversarial machine learning is also on the rise where people are trying to sabotage the data or the model after it has been deployed. So where in fact you have something called insider attacks and even outsider attacks, which are called black box attacks, where you don't even know what the input is and what the model is, but still you can confuse it or make it predict based on what you want it to do.
No, that's correct, actually. And with this, I'll move to Srinivas. And
I think I will just, in the interest of time,
Yeah.
we should give audience.
one point I like to check with you, if you can comment on that, is in last couple of months we have seen so much evolution of this new modus operandi on frauds, right? That too coming up because of generative AI. So if you can throw some light from that perspective as well, how can we, from compliance and technology perspective, address that aspect?
Yeah, I think there is a huge, immense opportunity for AI to be used for fraud detection. But that is still coming on the prediction thing, which I said, not generative exactly. And companies are already using it, not just now, as she said, since decades. But what I see is from compliance perspective, you already mentioned about data poisoning, what you was talking about, which can mislead into learning wrongly. The other is model inversion attack, which will look at the data and unearth the real data, which can come. And how do you prevent that is a big opportunity for us to build tools to prevent that for cyber engineers. The other aspect is on explainability, which you mentioned rightly. There are models which are proposed, but all are in the nascent stage. We have some regression coefficients we can use at a model level, but local level, at a tuple level, it's very difficult. Where people ask, why is it for me, my decision, please explain. And that's where the challenge is coming. Similarly, in bias also, there are measures, impact ratio, etc. Some regulators have defined, like New York has put a law. Recently, you would have come across a law. It's enforceable from, I think, 5th July already, which says that no algorithms can be deployed for recruiting people unless there is a bias audit, which is independently done by a third party with prescribed limits on impact ratio, etc. And I see a huge opportunity for startups, if they are here in the room, to develop tools which are in open source and make them ready for the organizations to demonstrate compliance according to these regulations. So it's a new field of pets which is evolving. That's what I would put in a positive note.
No, thanks for that, actually. And so given the time, it is already over, so probably we'll close the session here. Just a couple of things I'll say. We got to hear a lot of things. Definitely we need to have a balance between the benefits and the kind of regulations coming in. We need to have more innovators who can come up with the solutions which can help us adopt more. It is actually giving us opportunity, the innovator community and the startup community, more opportunity to come up with the solutions. This is kind of throwing problem statements to them, actually. In terms of regulations, definitely some of the countries are coming up with some sort of regulations, but we again need to see whether it's going to create more conducive environment for industry and government to adopt it, at the same time creating a safeguard level on top of it. Some of the leading providers, if I remember it correctly, probably it's Microsoft's this Copilot. These kind of platforms are coming up with some solution. For example, while learning is done, probably when it is in use, they will not capture a lot of data. Probably they can recall up to a certain extent, like 20 iterations or 30 prompt. Only these number of prompts they will recall. These kind of solutions are also coming in so that we'll have some more trust on the platforms. My data, while I'm using, it's not going on that. Whatever has gone, it is during the learning phase only. So such kind of things will definitely evolve, but probably as DSCI and as a security community, we are looking forward more innovators coming in and jumping in this game and coming in with the solutions. And I'll request all of you, in case you have, probably today we'll not be able to take questions because time is up. We have tea now, and probably outside we can exchange the thoughts in case you have any question. But feel free to share your inputs. We have our policy team working on this matter. We are looking at the aspects. So please share your inputs in case you have any ideas, how can we address, or what we at a national level should react on that. We'll be more than happy to discuss this at length. So with this, I'll thank all of you actually, and looking forward to engage each one of you outside. Thank you.
Thank you.